Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Dr. Lucy and I'm a clinical psychologist based in Melbourne, Australia. And my videos are an exploration of the intersection between Islam and particularly stories and lessons from the Quran and modern day psychology. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about in this video is the meaning that we give to our experiences, and particularly experiences where they really challenge us and cause us a lot of distress. Now, one of the beautiful things about the Quran is it reminds us that when we face things, and particularly really difficult times, they may not always seem what they appear. So we may experience something that we think is a terrible thing that happens to us, and it may be something that there's a hidden blessing in it that we can't see. And at the same time, we might experience something that we think is a good thing, and we may not realize that perhaps that thing that we want or that thing that we love may not in actual fact be good for us. So it reminds us to take a step back and question the immediate response or the immediate meaning that we give to things. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, it may be that you hate something and it's good for you, and it may be that you love something and it's bad for you, and Allah knows and you do not know. Now, one of my favorite stories that kind of elaborate or give a really good depiction of this concept, that something that might look bad may actually be a blessing for us, is one of the stories in Surah Al-Kahf about Musa and Khidr. And if you haven't read this particular story, I would really encourage you to have a read of it, maybe listen to some explanations on it, because for me it's one of my favorite, or if not my most favorite story in the Quran, because I think it's an amazing example that there can be incredible hidden wisdom behind events that can be absolutely devastating. Now, in this particular story, Musa travels with this person called Khidr, who has more knowledge than him. And on their travels, Khidr does some things that Musa sees as being really terrible things, and Musa can't keep quiet about it. And every time he speaks up and he says to Khidr, "What are you doing? This is a terrible thing that you've done." Khidr says, "I told you to be patient if you were going to come with me, and I told you that you wouldn't be patient." And each time that something terrible happens and he chastises Musa for questioning him, Musa says, okay, I'm sorry, I'll be patient. And by the time the third event happens and Musa gets upset, Khidr says to him, "Okay, this is where we part ways. I told you you couldn't be patient, that you would see these things and you would get upset. You couldn't be patient, and now we part ways. But before we part ways, I'll tell you the meaning of each one." And it's really fascinating the way that these events, which appear to Musa and would appear to anyone as being either unjust or being really terrible, that there was a hidden blessing behind them. Now, in the first instance, Musa and Khidr were actually riding on a boat of some poor fishermen who gave them free transport. And what Khidr did is he damaged the boat while they were traveling. And these were poor fishermen. He'd given Musa and Khidr free transportation, and Musa was appalled. Why would you damage the boat of these generous fishermen? And sometime later, they went into a town, and the townspeople were very rude to them. They didn't help them, and at that time it was customary to help travelers, and the people of that town refused to help them at all. And Khidr went and repaired a wall that was in that town, and again Musa got upset and said, "Why would you do something good for these people when look at how they've treated us?" And in the last event, which caused them to part ways, was when Khidr actually killed a child, and Musa couldn't bear the sight of this and got very upset. And then finally Khidr said, there was wisdom in everything that I did. And I was given permission or given the order by God to do these things. Of course, we can't, as human beings, go and inflict these especially damaging property or particularly taking a life. But in this particular story, Khidr had been ordered to do these particular things. And when he explained why he did these things, it becomes apparent to us as readers that there was an incredible blessing behind each one of these things that he did. So in the first event, where Khidr actually damaged the boat of the fishermen, he said to Musa there were pirates in that region. He'd been given that divine knowledge by Allah that there were pirates that were taking and seizing the boats of everyone in that region. And Khidr knew this. And he said when they would see that the boat of these poor fishermen were damaged, they would leave them alone. So it meant that their boat would not be stolen from them, because they'd look at this boat, think it's damaged, it's no good for us. And so while these fishermen went and were repairing their boat, whilst it would have been a terrible inconvenience for them, it meant that they got to keep their boat, which was a source of their livelihood. So for the fishermen, and most likely without knowing, being generous to Musa and Khidr was actually a blessing for them, because it meant that Khidr then damaged their boat because he had divine knowledge that pirates were going to take it. And it meant that once they repaired it, that they could continue to earn a living without it being seized by the pirates that had come into that region. In the second example, where Musa objected to Khidr repairing the wall of the people who had been really terrible to them, Musa was like, why would you do a good thing for such terrible people? And Khidr said, under the wall, this wall that was breaking down, it was actually hiding the inheritance that had buried gold of orphans. And if that wall had continued to break down, it would have exposed the treasures that were left behind for these orphans, and the people would have taken it. So by him repairing the wall, it meant that the treasures that were buried beneath it kept covered until those orphans were at an age where they could come in and take what had been left behind for them under the wall. So he actually protected the rightful inheritance of orphans that were in that town, who otherwise would have lost what was due to them. And in the last example, which was the most horrific, that Khidr went and killed a child. And again, we emphasize that we have no right to take the life of any other human being. But this in the Quran was explained as a special exception, that Khidr had that permission by divine order from God. And he said to Musa that child was going to grow up and be cause a lot of damage and do a lot of evil things. And I was ordered to kill that child, and that his parents are going to be blessed with another child who is going to be good for them, who's going to be a blessing for them. And so what I love about this story is it gives us this incredible story as we see that, to show us that what we might see in front of us may not be the truth. We see something with our eyes and we make a judgment about it. We say this is a terrible thing, or this is not fair, this is unjust. And what this story shows us is we don't know. There could be something that happens to us or people around us, and we don't realize that there's a hidden blessing behind it. And what I love about particularly this story is it highlights 3 examples of things that generally cause us some of the most pain in our life. The first example is loss to business and loss to livelihood. We all have to make a living, and it's common for people to become quite anxious and stressed about money and about how they're going to support their family. And if you have a business and there's damage that's caused to that, or there's something that happens that prevents you or affects you being able to make money, it causes an incredible amount of stress. And for anyone who's lost a business or has, lost a job, it's incredibly stressful. And if you have a business like these like these fishermen, and experience something like, terrible, like damage to property that stops you or interrupts your ability to make a living, it's incredibly distressing. And for anyone, that would cause a lot of perhaps anxiety, or could really contribute to them feeling, really down about their situation. The second example we have is when we see good things happening, or what to unjust people, or what we think are good things. So in this story, where Musa was upset at Khidr, and he said, why would you do something good for these terrible people? You repaired a wall. You could have you didn't even take payment for it. So you did something for them for free that benefited them. And this is another thing that often causes people distress when they've gone through a hard time and they've been oppressed by people, and then we see good things, or we think of good things happening to them. It can seem like it's unjust. Often people will say, well, these people are terrible. They've oppressed me. They've done terrible things. Why has good things happened to them? And for people might think there's injustice that's happening. And people say things like, life isn't fair. Look at these people. Something good happens for them. And again, we may not see the hidden wisdom that it appears to be benefiting them, but it's actually, it's to protect the rights of somebody else, or there's something good for good people that's going to come from it. And in the third example, we have what is perhaps considered to be one of the most devastating situations, is not only the death of a family member, but the death of a child. And to lose a child is, for most parents, their worst nightmare. When anyone I know who's ever lost a child, one of the things that comes out of their mouth, and understandably, people say children are supposed to bury their parents, parents are not supposed to bury their child. And I think that for any parent, that would be one of the greatest fears and the greatest heartbreaks of losing a child and having to bury a child. And it would be very difficult to imagine that there could be good in this. But in that situation, Khidr was given that divine knowledge that this is a child that's going to grow up and cause an immense amount of pain to others, and particularly to the parents. So it was a blessing in having that child removed from their lives. So this story invites us to expand our thinking about the meaning that we give to apparent tragedies that happen in our lives. And it challenges us to think about the meaning that we give to events, and invites us to take a different perspective and entertain the idea of something that appears to be so awful and appears to be so terrible, that it may in fact be a blessing for us. And I sometimes think, for myself or for others, going through a really difficult, challenging time, and we will all go through difficult, challenging times. That's the nature of life. It's, if we haven't experienced a major tragedy or a major test at this point in our life, then it is guaranteed that it will come at some point. And that's the reality of life. We will all go through heartbreak. We will all go through challenging times. That is part of the human condition. But what we do have a choice in is our perspective, and sometimes how we cope and how we move through our life will absolutely depend on the meaning that we give to the events that we experience. For some people who experience difficult and tragic events, it will make them bitter, it will make them negative, it will make them pessimistic, and it will feed a narrative that they may have of saying, see, terrible things always happen to me. Life's not fair. I've been a good person. Why would this happen to me? And when we start going down that train of thought, what happens is it tends to then make our lives smaller, because we tend to then close off from people. We then hold a view that the world is not fair, that it may be that good things happen to bad people, or bad things happen to good people, or that no matter what I do, it's something awful is always going to ruin things. And when we have that narrative, it's only going to increase our feelings of depression. It's only going to increase feelings of anger, of bitterness, resentment. And we know that in the long run, when we consistently feel like that, and that's how we interpret events, then we will continue to become more and more negative people. And that has a whole range of negative impacts in our life. But if we can start to choose to look at situations in a way that we entertain the possibility that maybe there's good, and maybe we won't ever know where the good is. It might not be that we will see the direct outcome and think, okay, this terrible thing happened, but something good came out of it. Sometimes we will see that, sometimes we won't. But it is about us choosing to have that faith that if I've gone through something difficult, that there has to be wisdom behind it. And I trust that there has to be something good in it. And when we choose that meaning, it often changes everything. It often makes us more optimistic. It often makes us more hopeful. It connects us to faith. And research shows that when people are able to do this, to look at a situation and choose to take a more positive meaning, it has a beneficial outcome in all areas of their lives, including reducing symptoms of anxiety and depression. Now, going back to this story, I often think about these events that are described in this chapter of the Quran when I see terrible things happening in the world around us. And I think about the people in that story who experienced those events, and we don't know anything about them. Like, we don't know anything about the fishermen in that story and how they reacted to seeing that their boat was damaged. We can only imagine that it was upsetting for them because it was upsetting for Musa. But we don't know then anything about the individuals or how they interpreted it. And I sometimes wonder, those fishermen may have looked at that, and for some, it may have reinforced a really negative view about life. It may have reinforced for them, see terrible things always happen, that life's always going to be hard, that even though we're hardworking fishermen, that our boat's damaged and we always have to struggle. And for some of them, maybe some of them never knew that there were pirates in the area, but they were able to look and think, you know what, we don't know the wisdom behind this, but we still have our boat. We can repair it and we can move on and we can recover from this. And I think often then the same thing about the people in the town, that some of them who saw the wall being repaired and think, there you go, look at these terrible people, and someone's come and done something good. It's not fair. Why should we bother trying to be good, God-fearing people when you can be a terrible person and something good's going to happen to you? And again, with the parents who lost their child, we don't know. Maybe the parents would have looked at that and not realized the connection between the child that they were given and the blessing of the new child that they were given, and seeing the connection that perhaps they were given that child because their other one was taken away. We don't know how any of those people interpreted those events. But for us knowing the meaning behind it, we can see that for so many people who were impacted by Khidr's action, that there was only good, that he came not to inflict harm on them, but to do things that were going to protect good people and bring blessings into their lives. And so I invite you, as I reflect on this myself, that for us to challenge ourselves about the daily things that we experience, big or small, and how we interpret them. And we might experience just having a bad day. It might not be the most terrible thing in the world, but we can sometimes become really negative. Like, oh, I've just had the worst day, I was stuck in traffic, or, I got a flat tire and then I missed this really important meeting. And we could then look at it in a really negative way. And it might be something really big and tragic in our lives that's devastated us. But whatever it is, this story invites us to perhaps look at it from a different way, and reminds us that we have choice in terms of the meaning that we take, that we can either go down a really negative path, and again, that will have negative flow-ons in all areas of our life, including not only our mental health, but our physical health, our relationship with other people, our ongoing mood. Or we can actually choose to say, you know what, I don't know why this happened. It's been difficult, or it's been, really challenging, or it's even been devastating. I don't know why it happened, but you know what? I'm going to choose to believe that as part of my journey, there's good that can come out of this. And I think if we can all remind ourselves that we have the choice to give meaning to our stories, that it then has the potential to change everything in terms of our outlook and how we cope with the difficult things that come our way. Thank you so much for listening till the end of this video. I hope that there's something beneficial that you can take out of this. I wish you love, peace, and prosperity in your life, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.